Well, welcome back to Youth Power. Welcome back to Unmask Your Potential, the virtual experience. I want to welcome our next speaker, who's going to speak on youth power in 2020 elections, how to have your voice heard. This session is facilitated by a good friend and partner, Michael Minks from Youth Service America. Mike has spent the best part of 13 years, about Mike, right? Working with the YSA team, running everything from campaigns to operations. He has a wealth of information and expertise to share with us. And I'm very excited and honored that he's here to present with us this afternoon. So Mike, welcome.
Great. Thank you, Amy. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and happy Global Youth Service Day. Today is the first day of Global Youth Service Day weekend, the 32nd annual, and I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate than sharing ideas with you all about how to increase youth power during this election cycle. So we are going to go through a quick introduction about how YSA thinks about youth voting and civic participation as part of the larger ecosystem of youth participation. And then we'll spend about 15 minutes each on 3 different strategies that we think about around increasing advocacy efforts around the issues that you work to address through your service learning projects, around registering, educating, and getting out the vote peer-to-peer during election cycles, and then how to use advocacy during elections to really increase and call for youth voice and leadership in public decision-making ongoing over the years. And then we'll end with a few key actions that you can take right away today or this weekend or next week to begin this during Global Youth Service Day. So I'm going to jump over to the presentation, and you should be seeing the PowerPoint now, and of course we mentioned that it is Global Youth Service Day, and we've really added this voting and civic engagement element as one of the 3 big things that we call on young people to do during Global Youth Service Day and all year round. And I want to share a little bit about a new campaign that we're working on that we'll be launching over the next year or so. That's really built on our belief that young people, communities, and our democracy thrive when we all work together for the common good. And that is to really increase youth participation across the country to 50% by the 250th anniversary or birthday of the United States on July 4th, 2026. And looking at volunteering rates, voting rates, and joining or membership in groups and organizations as the 3 big indicators of participation that we're looking to increase. And this is will feed into other larger goals. You'll hear from the National Commission later this afternoon about some of the goals that they're thinking about from a policy angle at the national level. And so this certainly will feed into that. And we're really looking at volunteering and service, including service learning, as rates that we want to increase, voting and civic participation, which goes beyond just voting, but includes advocacy and activism around the issues that you care about, organizing others through lots of different ways in your community. And then also increasing the number of young people that are members of groups and organizations. So a lot more to come on this in the years ahead. We're really looking at launching this starting next summer in 2021 with a 5-year ramp up to that 250th celebration in 2026. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that to come. But of course, before then, we have this election cycle and really thinking about how we can increase that impact on the health of our the civic health of our country and our democracy. And we look at some of the measures that the Civic Health Index, which is the official national tracking of the civic health of the nation. And it includes all of these things, from connecting with others and including your friends and family and discussing issues and giving and volunteering and following the news and participating in politics and expressing your views. And there's no better time to do all of these things than during elections. So that's the quick overview of how we think about the work around ServiceVote in the larger context of youth participation. So the first strategy that we really want to think about is how you use election cycles and the fact that candidates and politicians are out meeting lots of people, trying to get votes, to advocate for the causes that you care about and are working to address through your projects. And this was the initial goal behind ServiceVote when it started back in 2000, is we kept hearing lots of people that we were talking to who were planning volunteer projects and service learning projects and participating in Global Youth Service Day, or National Youth Service Day at the time, that they weren't getting involved in the election because they felt that they were already engaged, they had already done their part, they had made a difference through their service, and that they felt like they didn't need to vote. And we really thought that was, we were glad that people were feeling empowered and that they had made a difference through their service, but thought that not getting involved in the advocacy and political side of things was not the message that we wanted to be sending. And so you'll see some of the kind of retro-looking posters here that we created to really get that point across. Of people are meeting all kinds of immediate needs through their service. They're building houses and picking up trash on beaches and tutoring other kids, and that's all super important work, but that's not going to solve all of those problems in the long term, and that to really address that root cause of all of these issues that you're working on, that advocacy angle is really an important piece to go on to. And you may start with a service project. Most people do. That's how you learn about these issues. It's how you get excited about them. It's how you see what the needs actually are and how you learn more about the issue. But so that the next step, as you continue and sustain your projects, to really add that advocacy angle is a key piece. So this really fits within our framework that we call our LEAD ASAP framework, of obviously the double meaning of that young people are leading now as soon as possible, but they're also leading through awareness, service, advocacy, and philanthropy. And this really aligns really nicely with, many of you may be familiar with the direct, indirect, and advocacy forms of service learning. That the direct is really the S in LEAD ASAP. The indirect is really that awareness and philanthropy, and the advocacy is obviously advocacy. So, and again, there's no better time. Of course, you can do advocacy anytime, any day of any year, but that election cycles are really, present a unique opportunity to do advocacy in some ways that you may not be able to do other times of the year. So in thinking about all of those elected officials that you want to advocate to, a little bit of trivia for you. How many elected officials are there in the United States? And we'll take a quick pause. You can throw out some guesses. You go ahead and use the chat feature, and you can reply to everyone or just to me, and so that other folks can see your guesses. And I'll give a little bit for folks to type in a couple of guesses. And Amy and Pam, if you can help kind of monitor some of that. And Amy, if you were trying to share some of those guesses, I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that, Mike. I said we have guesses from 500 to 1,077, very specific,
Okay.
to 15,000 to 50,000. So 350,000, 50. So all over the board.
All right. One of those is much closer than the others. And this answer is usually surprising to most people. It is over 500,000 elected officials in the United States. And as you'll see by the numbers, very few of those are at the federal level, right? All of the members of Congress and the president and vice president are really the only elected officials at the federal level. So there's only 542 of those. And then another 18,000 at the state level. And then, as you'll see, the vast majority, 491,000, 96% of elected officials in the United States are at the local level. And so as you think about your advocacy efforts, we really encourage you to think about starting at the local level. Not only because there are just a lot more elected officials, that they're a lot closer to you. If you think about who you're connected to and who your family is connected to and who your friends are connected to, that there is probably an elected official in those circles somewhere. I always like to share that growing up, the mayor of my small town in Minnesota was our 8th grade science teacher. So we all knew, the mayor of the town, and that's true, for a lot of local government officials. And just want to run through some of those, the types of people that you can think about engaging in advocacy around the issues that you care about. At the city level, think about your mayor, your city council, neighborhood councils, and then in addition to elected officials, there's the appointed officials or the employees. So your city manager or heads of departments and agencies for the city, the police and fire departments and their chiefs. At the county level, similarly, the county executives or county supervisors or county commissioners or board members, they're called something a little bit different in different states. Your county attorney, your county sheriff, lots of different folks who have leadership positions at the county level. Within your school district, your school superintendent, obviously they're not elected, but very much a decision maker. And then obviously all of your school board members are elected. And then of course thinking about your other administrators as well who are appointed by those elected officials. At the state level, your state senators, your state reps, or your state delegates, your governor, or your lieutenant governor, other state offices. Most states have secretaries of state, or and other officials. Your state service commission, again, not elected but appointed by each state's governor, can be great assets and resources for you as you think about advocacy and service-related programs. And then, of course, your U.S. representative and U.S. senators at the federal level. So again, just going back to there are obviously a lot more local elected officials than there are federal, but the local level is also where the vast majority of people are affected by day-to-day policy decisions. Certainly, and especially as we've seen during this crisis, what the federal government does is really important. But it's also, how each state implements policies and does things, and how each city and locality does things. And so, most of your interactions with government on a day-to-day basis are going to be with your local government, right? The school you attend, the parks you go to, your local environmental issues, all the local, housing and health programs. All of those things are really decided at the state level, right? I know you've heard a lot about education policy issues during the conference. and and of course, what the Federal Department of Education does is important. But remember that the state requirements, and then every school district controls its own curriculum and its own policies. And so if you're looking to for example impact education issues, right? You can certainly and we certainly encourage advocacy at the federal level, but working with your local school board and to try to get things changed, is going to be a more direct path to making some of the changes that you want to see. So I want to share the resources we have around this, and the links are in the email and notes of resources that went out around all of the sessions. But if you go to gysd.org, you'll see under all of the project ideas, you'll see this vote section, and you'll see the 3 topics that we're talking about today. And then if you go ahead and expand the advocate and raise awareness of a cause, you will see lots of different resources that we have around that. And Amy, can you confirm that the sharing switched over to the website away from the PowerPoint?
We're actually still on your PowerPoint presentation, Mike. It says it's the vote, advocate, raise awareness slide.
All right. All right. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So, so as I was saying, on the Global Youth Service Day website, under the vote section, as you scroll down to all of the ideas, you'll see the 3 topics that we're talking about as part of this session. And so you just click expand on this advocate and raise awareness of the cause. And you'll see lots of ideas and resources. Organizing a service project, we call them a service stop in the context of an election. Kind of playing on the campaign stop language, but inviting elected officials or candidates to participate in your service learning projects and add that discussion around the issue that it's addressing. Lots of different ways to connect youth and policymakers. Obviously, helping people reach out through, calling and emailing, texting and writing. Lots of different tools to do that. Lots of different public meetings that people can attend. Obviously, campaign events. If we, get to see a lot of in-person campaign events again this year, we'll see how that all goes through the fall. But lots of different ways to connect directly with these candidates and policymakers. Using the power of the media, especially online media, to really generate your own content and stories around the issues that you care about. Joining an existing advocacy campaign, right? There are a ton of national organizations that are leading advocacy campaigns around different issues, from education to climate change to, student loan debt to, healthcare, to hunger and poverty. There's all of these national campaigns that have ready-to-made resources for you that you can take and use at the local level. You can create and share issue guides during elections. That's the kind of nonpartisan guide to a particular issue and the background on it and where candidates stand, and you can do all of that research and pull those together and then share that as a resource for other voters. You can convene community dialogues. Obviously, those are probably going to be online for their near future, to really have that community discussion around the issue and the policy issues at play in the community. You can develop your own policy proposal that you suggest to candidates and to elected officials. Or you can really organize your school community. And there's a ton of student activism resources for you. So tons of different ways to really advocate around the issues that you care about during election seasons. And I will, and I want to make sure to point out that you don't need to be 18 to do any one of these things, right? You need to be 18 to go vote, and we'll talk about that next. But you can do any of these activities, no matter what age you are. And it's important to remember that just because you may not be old enough to vote, your elected representatives and decision makers still represent you, and you are their boss. So and it's important, especially as they're asking for your vote to get elected or re-elected, that you use this opportunity to really speak up about the issues that you want to see them address, and the things that you want them to do once they, if they get elected. So before we move on to the next section around registering, educating, and getting out the vote, I want to take a quick pause to see if there were any questions on this first topic around advocating for the issues that you care about. So I see one question around that, since youth are staying in place and that we're all at home these days, have organizations adjusted ways to participate on their websites, and that's obviously some have and some haven't. We're all trying to figure this out as we go through this. Certainly the political parties and campaigns are trying to figure out what what the election looks like when you can't host big campaign events, but the best part is that so many of these things can be done virtually, in the same way that you are changing your regular kind of classroom activities to distance learning. That a lot of these things can be done. The research that you're doing on your computer and messages that you're putting out online. Obviously, the online advocacy is a huge piece of all of these campaigns. So, I'd expect that that most national organizations that have advocacy campaigns, have those digital resources for you, and how you can help spread the word online. So another important question, especially for groups that don't normally get involved in advocacy, to really kind of try it out. And this really raises a related question around, people get very nervous around lobbying and advocacy if you're a nonprofit, and with students, that you don't take a partisan approach. And so the way that we really look at this is that you're teaching these skills to them. And you may not, and you may kind of do a practice run on something that's kind of not not something that might actually go out, but that once you use these opportunities to kind of teach them these skills and give them and help them learn the ways that they can be involved, that then they can go choose to do that on their own, right outside of your program. So it can be a lot of kind of education and practicing some of these things, and and helping guide them through it, but that they're doing their kind of individual advocacy around these issues kind of on their own after you've done that. And I think the other key there is to really keep it very kind of issue and policy focused, that you're not encouraging people to necessarily go out for one candidate or the other, or endorse or support any elected official, that it's really keeping it very nonpartisan, focused on the issue. If you're researching and developing a policy proposal on an environmental issue, for instance, that doing that work is completely nonpartisan, and it really ties closely back into service learning. You're going to want to be researching these issues anyway during your investigation work, and then really thinking about, if you start with a service project, that part of the reflection at the end, and as you're thinking about, continuing your project or sustaining your project or having more impact, that you can then encourage people to think about, taking on one of these advocacy activities as part of the next step to their work. And so really building it into that kind of that reflection and that demonstration and sustainability phase. All right. So next, let me get back to the presentation. I hit the right key there. All right, and just to remind folks that advocacy is super important, and we saw this especially the last election cycle around the gun violence and school violence issues and March for Our Lives. That they were doing that advocacy with all of the marches and protests, and that then really translated into a lot of political engagement during the last election. And we're certainly seeing a lot around climate change and the climate strikes now, and hopefully on lots of different issues. So the next, the second piece that we really think about is how young people can play a key role in registering voters, educating voters, and getting out the vote. Really that REV acronym, really revving up the vote. And we know that young people can, just like on any other issue, play a key role in influencing their peers, their near peers, their families, their friends, their neighbors. And that, frankly, it's just a lot more effective, if we're trying to reach 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, to register to vote and to vote in their first election or to, who do they want to hear from, right? That they'll be much more likely to listen to one of their peers than necessarily an adult, telling them that they need to go vote. And so again, we really focus on three elements: that voter registration, because that's really key, especially in states that don't offer automatic voter registration or same-day registration, where there are deadlines ahead of time. It's a process that we all need to go through. Really educating and getting information out about the election and the process and candidates, and that we see that's one of the big barriers that we'll talk about. And then, of course, on election day and leading up to election day, all of the get out to vote activities. So another quick trivia. How many people do you think have turned 18 since the last presidential election that will be voting for their first time in a presidential election this year? And some of those may have voted in the 2018 midterm elections, but how many do you think will have turned 18 since 2016 and will be voting for the president for the first time this year? And same thing, throw it in the chat, and Amy or others on the NYLC team, if you can throw out some of the guesses that people have, that'd be great.
We've got 100,000, 300,000, 10.5 million. Let's see. 250,000, 10 million, 50 million, 2.7 million.
All right, so we have a couple that are about halfway there, one way over, and a lot way under, which is just about the way it went the last time. Answer is 22 million. And you'll see a chart later on that really breaks that out of the participation of all of the voters. But that means that we have 22 million young people to reach this year that this will be their first presidential election cycle. And from the last election, the stat was that less than half were registered to vote if they were 18 or 19 and it was their first election, which means that automatically, right, the turnout was less than that. and that almost 30% said that they missed the registration deadline or that they didn't know how or where to register. So obviously a really key issue as we think about really reaching all of these new first-time voters during the election cycle. And you'll see, I'll run quickly through a couple of stats. Rates were the highest all the way back in 1972, which is the first time after the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18, and that was the peak at around 55%. And it's gone up and down over the decades, but never really gotten out of the 40s. And last time was 46% that actually turned out to vote. And the good news is that we did see a major increase in the midterm election cycle. We went from just under 20% in 2014 to 28% in 2018, which was one of the biggest increases that we've ever seen in youth voter turnout. But still, even as we should celebrate that massive increase, it's still 28% turned out in that last midterm election. So clearly a lot of work to do. And you'll see that in this year, the young people that are in our age range, Gen Z, will make up about 10% of the total electorate. And so there are certainly, the older generations still have larger percentages of the overall vote, but that there are still a lot of young people that 10%, when you think about the margin that most elections are decided by, 10% and getting, more involved, can really make a key difference. And you'll see on this slide, a little bit different than the last one. This is how many, those percentages across generations. So, you saw that, that 28, 30%, one of the initial measures right after was 31%, which is where they're getting this 30. 30% of young voters turned out, but 42 of millennials, 53, 55, 64, as you go up the generations. And so, you often hear that politicians, right, pay attention to older people more and focus more on those issues. And it's because, more than double the number of those generations turn out. And then you saw from the previous slide that they're also a bigger percentage of the population. And so obviously politicians are going to go where the votes are. And until the younger voters can start matching some of these percentages and turn out at the same rates, that's really going to be one of the key ways to increase the focus on the issues that young people care about. If people don't turn out to vote, politicians are not going to focus as much on those issues than the ones they're hearing about from the older voters that they know will turn out and vote for them. And some of these barriers will not be surprising to you of why young people don't vote. Obviously, school and work schedules can be really tricky in making sure that you have time on election day to vote, not knowing where to vote, not knowing enough about, or feeling they don't know enough about the candidates or the issues, transportation to the polls. Some people just don't like the candidates, or are too busy, or there's issues with voter registration, or they missed the deadlines, or they just didn't think it would make a difference. There's tons of different reasons why we see that young people aren't engaged. And so we wanted to kind of condense all of that information into some key takeaways and some key themes that we see. And the first reason is that they're just not asked to participate and to vote. And the key to this is really making those individual asks, either from a caring adult or a peer. Of course, we see that the mass PSAs, do help, but they only do so much, right? And we see, we always see that, well, we posted the message on Facebook, and or we put it in the school announcements, or we put up posters all over the place, right? And those are all important things to do, and they certainly, get us part of the way there. But to really close that gap around making sure that every young person is asked to vote and asked to participate in the election, it really has to be that personal one-on-one, where there's that connection, right? It's a young person asking their friends, asking their parents, asking their neighbors, where it's teachers and youth program staff and caring adults and mentors, making that personal connection for the young person, saying, hey, I know that you're a part of, the green club at school or the sustainability committee. And, have you thought about, how the candidates in the election are thinking about the environmental issues that you care about? You really need to go vote, and making those personal asks to the folks in your network to really make sure they're participating. And the second is that they're just not taught how. Right? It can be really overwhelming if you've never done it before. And we should make voting a whole lot simpler in this country. But right now it's not in a whole lot of places. And if you're going through this for the first time, right? It's okay, how do I, do I need to register? Do I need to register by a certain date? What information do I need to register? Where do I do it? Can I do it online? Do I have to, fill out a paper form and mail it in? And then it's, how do I actually learn about the issues and the candidates, and where do I go to find out who's going to be on my ballot? And, where do I find, all of their stances on all of these issues? And, how do I get informed so that I can make, the vote that I want to make? And then on election day itself, right? It's, where is my polling place? How do I get there? What are the hours? What are the ID laws in my state, if any? Do I need, what do I need to bring with me? There's just all of these things that you need to know that, again, if you've never done it before, there's no reason that you should know that, if no one has ever taught that. And so really making sure we're sharing that information in ways that help people vote and get involved. The third is that even if they are asked to participate and they know how to do it, that there are just these systemic barriers in place. And again, a lot of this is state policy around elections. And you saw a lot of these barriers on the previous slides, right? It's time, because you're in school, or you're having to work, or you're having to take care of family, younger siblings. It's transportation. It's polling place location. Right? A lot of places, make it very hard for college students to get to polling places. And a lot of these barriers are really tied to income, to race, and we see that in communities across the country where the disenfranchisement of particular groups of voters, is really a key issue. And so the more that we're focused on identifying what those barriers are and how we can help first-time voters overcome that, is really a key piece. And so those three reasons really represent that REV model, that they're not asked, that making that ask, and the first thing is, right, are you registered to vote? Make sure you go out and get your voter registration in if you need to ahead of time. That's that first key part of that ask. The teaching how is really that voter education component, and then the really focusing your get out the vote efforts on helping people address these barriers to their participation. And then the last, which we think is a combination of people having maybe done it before, but facing the first three reasons, is that they just kind of get turned off of the process, or they don't think their vote will make a difference. And we think a lot of the same strategies around that we've talked about, of really connecting it back to the issues that they care about and maybe are thinking about and addressing through other ways, including their service, of really helping make that argument, that it really can make a difference, especially at the local level. In addition, all of the same resources that we're sharing are all collected in one place, organized by these 4 reasons at ysa.org/vote. And you'll see kind of how we've broken out the strategies that we're talking about today to meet these four reasons that young people don't participate. The next, I'm going to go back to the website quickly, and all of these resources are in the same place, just above: register, educate, and get out the vote. And you'll see lots of resources around registering people to vote. League of Women Voters has a great high school voter registration resource. Rock the Vote has some great things, including a widget that you can add to your school or to your campus or to your organization's website and actually track how many people are registering using that tool through you. Lots of voter education stuff around debate watches and forums and mock elections and lots of different ways to do that voter education around the issues. We recommend that if they're interested, young people think about volunteering with a campaign at the local level. A lot of campaigns are now adding, really good online tools to their websites to really, to host house parties or virtual, online gatherings, or to text or to make calls through their apps that you can do, from wherever you are, that are really easy ways for young people to support one of the campaigns that they think will be good on the issues that they care about. Serving as poll workers or election judges are another thing that we really encourage. A lot, again, this is dependent on your state and sometimes your city. But in most states, 16 and 17-year-olds can be poll workers, and several states have specific programs. If you look at your Secretary of State or your statewide election official, they have programs to really help this. I love every time that I go vote here, and my polling place is the local elementary school a few blocks away. That elementary school students who go to the school are always the one to hand me my I voted sticker after I'm done. They're too young; they can't actually check me in. There's an adult that does that. But this little elementary school student is the one who helps me walk me over from where I check in to the booth and then hands me my sticker afterwards, which I always think is just a super cool thing to see of these second, third, and fourth graders helping out at the polling place on election day, and then of course helping people get out to vote. So take a look through all of these great resources to really help you register, educate, and get out the vote during elections. With that, another quick pause before we move on to the next topic, and we'll take some questions again.
Mike, it looks like we have one question in the Q&A. It asks, is youth overall in the population or youth who are eligible to vote?
Yes, and there are quite a few different charts that I showed, and one of them was of eligible voters, and one of them was the total population. So it's both, depending on which chart you were talking about. The best resource to really delve into a lot of this data, if you kind of want to geek out on on all of these numbers, is Circle out of Tufts University, and their URL is civicyouth.org. And they have, and they're the ones that really do the best job at tracking all of this data over years, and they do different analyses after every election. They've been doing things after all the primary elections this year. They have an index of how different states rank in their policies around youth engagement, and they're really the best source for all of this data. And so if you want to kind of delve deeper into that, I'd recommend you go check out civicyouth.org for all of that information.
We don't have any, I'm sorry, Mike, I was just going to say we don't have any more open questions at the moment. So, but keep putting them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure we try to get to those. Perfect. Thanks, Amy. And just remember that that the people who didn't vote in any election are always bigger than, are always way more people than any of the candidates receive themselves. So, right, if not voting was one of the choices, that would win every time. So, when you think about, you don't turn out because you don't think it'll make a difference. Believe me, when if enough people did, it certainly will make a difference. And so the third and final topic that we'll get into is really how you use advocacy during elections to increase youth voice and youth leadership in your community long term. And last trivia question is how many cities or school districts do you think there are in the country that would have to make these decisions about how and when they're including youth voice in their decision making? And same thing, you can throw some guesses into chat. And Amy, when if any come in, let me know what some of those guesses are. We've got 5,125,000, 2,036,000, 25,000, 220,000. All right, I think so you're across the board. I think you're all catching on to me that these numbers are always way higher than you initially might think they are. So we definitely, all of those really high guesses in there are, even above the real answer. So, which is 89,000. And so, when we think about this concept of increasing youth voice and youth leadership, it's you organizing within your community, within your school district, within your county, to really make that happen. And that is done right neighborhood by neighborhood, town by town, city by city, school district by school district. There's no kind of national edict that's going to come down that says every city has to do this, or every school district has to provide these leadership opportunities. And so it's going to take all of you kind of helping make that happen at the local level in the 89,000 local governments that you are a part of. I'm just going to run through a few quick resources and then jump to the website again. But want to point out that the U.S. Conference of Mayors has a lot of youth involvement resources, and they have a task force, and they have a couple hundred of their member mayors signed on to this, and they've set and they have all of these strategies around how they're encouraging their mayors and cities to engage youth in decision making, things like having youth councils and internship programs for youth at the city level, and how you do community surveys, constituent surveys on social media and schools, hosting youth days and youth rallies and youth forums, all of those kinds of things, and they have lots of resources around that. The National League of Cities, which is the counterpart to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, for a lot of, not only cities, but a lot of county and local governments are part of that as well.
also has a whole youth civic engagement set of resources around things that your city can do for increasing youth voice. The Forum for Youth Investment has a ton of great resources around creating youth councils, which they've worked with for both city and statewide youth councils, and all of the practices that have to be in place around that. Circle, the people we were just talking about that have all of the resources, the research, also have a Teaching for Democracy Alliance as one of their programs, and they have checklists and resources for how school districts and school administrators can really build this in. And the Civics Now Coalition also has a whole policy platform for state and local policymakers around increasing civic education and civic engagement. And so I know I ran through all of those really quickly, and the point that I want to make with those is that lots of resources exist out there to help you do all of these things. And so as you think about how youth can be involved in public decision making in your community, you don't have to start from scratch, and there are already a lot of mayors and local officials who are doing this around the country. And and so you can actually use that as a tool when you go to your local elected officials of saying, hey, will you join lots of your peers, other mayors around the country in doing this work? And or if they're already doing one piece of it, right, you can say like, hey, thank you so much for your work around adding this youth voice component to our local decision-making process. Can we also do this other thing? And all of the resources that I just ran through are all linked, again, back on the GYSD website under Increased Youth Voice in Decision Making. And once you expand that, you'll see all of these resources that I just talked about from the National League of Cities and Conference of Mayors and the Forum for Youth Investment and Civics Now. All of that is here that you can delve deeper into. And again, just like on the issues you care about, if you want to see increased youth voice and youth participation in the public decision making that goes on in your community, there is no better time to demand that and ask for that than during elections, right? You can certainly do it anytime, and we encourage that, right? But when these local elected officials are running for office, is the time to go out and ask, how will you engage youth in the decision making and in the policy process, in our community if you're elected, and make a direct ask of, will you commit to, having a youth council or surveying youth or giving opportunities for youth to speak at public meetings. How will you provide these opportunities for young people, and make them give you an answer while they're running for office. And with that, I'll pause for the last couple of questions before we jump into some immediate things that you can do right away to get started on this during Global Youth Service Day.
So Mike, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Brenda is asking, how can you explain to the youth that you make a difference when they are taught in school about the electorals, what electorals have that electorals have the last say?
Yep. So, I think, one of the key issues that we always wrestle with, which I think is what you're getting at, is that, you can ask, it may not happen. And you're not necessarily going to, to kind of get exactly the thing that you want, right away, and just because you asked, right? Politics is really about power. And it's always been around, of who's included and who's not and who's at the table. We often think about, right, that, when the country started, right, it was, white male landowners, right, had the say, women's rights and civil rights, and have been really great battles, in our country's history, to increase that. And so, I think being really honest and straightforward, and just saying like, hey, this, it's a long game we're playing. Hopefully, we'll get, an elected official will be receptive to what you're looking for, and will work with us. But they may not, and that's, and that's the way it goes. And to really, kind of use that reflection to then talk about, okay, then, kind of, where do we go next? How do we continue asking for this? How do we continue the fight? It can be really disappointing, right, when this thing that you've been advocating for doesn't go through, or or an election result doesn't go the way that you want it to go. But that can also be really motivating, I think, to to go back to it, and try again. And I think, we just need to level with young people, especially when they're trying this for the first time. That we want to be optimistic and hope things go the way we want them to go. But it's life, when that things won't, and we can't give up the fight.
So there are a few more questions, but what I would love, I think I'll end with one question, and then maybe we get you to chat with some folks after, if that's okay, Mike. Because I think this one might lead into where you're headed with your presentation, and how can service learning promote youth voter registration and civic participation, which I would also then add on, how can people get involved now?
Yep. Yeah, so, like we were saying with that peer-to-peer registration education, get out the vote, think about this voter participation, or the civic health of our democracy, being the issue that you're addressing through your service learning project, right? So you can think about it as adding that advocacy component on other issues, but you can also take increasing participation in the policy process or in elections as the issue that you're addressing, as your service learning project, and then use all of those registration, education, get out the vote resources that we shared as the activities that you're actually doing. And again, all of those can be done in a completely nonpartisan way. There are sometimes restrictions on federal funding being used for voter registration efforts, but certainly it is okay for education institutions and nonprofits, kind of independent of some of those federal dollar restrictions, to be involved in doing this work. And so some specific opportunities, again, and lots more of these are on ysa.org/vote, or on the Global Youth Service Day page that we've been showing there. It's all of the same content, just organized a little bit differently. And so two really easy things that you can do right now, today, or this weekend, is if your family hasn't done the census yet, make sure you do that, so that we have an accurate count. That determines representation and billions of dollars in federal funding over the next 10 years, is dependent on getting that count correct, and making sure that everyone in your community is counted. So if your family hasn't done that, remind all your friends, neighbors, everyone you're talking to, that if they haven't done that, to fill out that census. And then to take the time to double check your voter registration, and make sure, if you're old enough to vote, that you can do that. And in most states, 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register. And certainly if you will be 18 by election day, but you're not 18 now, you can still register. So take that time, and vote.org is a great nonpartisan resource for that. You can actually put in your information. It'll pull up if you're registered to vote, and your information. So if you need to change any of that, including your address, if you've moved since the last election, that you can do that right there. So those are two super simple things that you can do today or this weekend. The other opportunity that Kathy Berger Kay, one of our great friends in the service learning field, is organizing is around, it's called Happy Birthday Now Vote, around including voter registration information and voting in birthday cards when students turn 18. And the information about this is included in the service project information on the conference website and in the information that that NYLC sent out with the other with a couple of other projects, service projects for the conference. And so really encouraging if you're looking for something cool to do. And we've seen this happen in a lot of schools where, you know, as students are turning 18 their senior year, that on the day that they turn 18, you know, that the student council or the administrators or the civics teacher or, you know, someone is, you know, is making sure that they, you know, get a voter registration form, you know, get asked to make sure they go vote, and these birthday cards created by other young people, I think, are a really cool way to add to that and to really make that ask and really personal and fun to make you think about and remember voting. There's a teacher's guide with that, a book reading list if you're want to bring these topics into your classroom or your group that Kathy has put together, and those links are again from where all the service projects are for the conference website. And then looking ahead, you know, through the summer and fall, obviously thinking about that there's a lot of primary elections that'll still happen that have been rescheduled, where you can get out the vote, voter registration around the 4th of July, and, you know, kind of the patriotism of that. The national political conventions will take place in August, and you can do a lot of voter education around that. 9/11 Day of Service and then National Voter Registration Day in September are great times to do voter registration work. The presidential debates will be another opportunity to do voter education throughout the month of October, in that last month leading up to the election. And then, of course, that first Tuesday in November and the few days before it, really working to get out the vote. So, so again, you can start super simple. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure people are filling out the census today. You know, over the weekend or next week, or, you know, over the next few weeks, as you're looking for things to do at home, that birthday card project, and then really planning to take advantage of some of the key events over the next several months leading up to the election, where you can put all of these resources and ideas into practice. And so with that, we'll wrap up. Happy to stay around and answer those last few questions if you'd like, Amy. And otherwise, just want to wish everyone, again, a very happy Global Youth Service Day, and hope you go out and increase youth power over the next few months during the election.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. You shared so many great ideas about how young people can share their voice and make an impact. I want to encourage everybody to check out YSA's website, to participate in the Happy Birthday Now Vote service project, as well as the other ones. And a couple of things. If you tag if you're participating in any of the service projects during Global Youth Service Day, tag Do Good From Home, right, Mike?
Yep.
That way there's some donations from Hasbro that will happen for COVID-19 essential workers, the children of COVID-19 essential workers. So we want to make sure we're tagging our service projects with Global Youth Service Day, the Doing Good From Home hashtag, and hashtag SLC20, so we know you were part of the conference.
All of the hashtags.
All of the hashtags, just hashtag away. But we want to make sure, for sure, you do good from home, so that we get those toys in the hands of those children. So we'll make sure we're tweeting out that, sharing that through social media. but we'll get that in the chat box as well. But again, Mike, thank you so much. Such great information, such a great partnership. Thank you to you and YSA for everything that you do.
Thanks, everybody.